Good morning. This is Tailinh Agoyo, and we're on Rise and Thrive, Indigenous Art, Culture, and Joyful Acts of Resistance. And today I have a special guest, Priscilla Bell, who is an incredible artist based out of Philadelphia. Hi, Priscilla.
Hi, how are you, Tailinh? How are you?
Hello. It's so good to see you today. I haven't seen you in quite a while, and I'm really excited to have this conversation. If you're not familiar with Priscilla's work, I encourage you to go to Priscilla's website, pbutterpaint.com, and while we're on, because we'll be probably referencing some of her work there. But Priscilla, welcome. And can you give everybody a bit of an introduction, however you'd like to do it for yourself?
Yes. Well, thank you. I'm very glad to be invited here. My name is Priscilla Bell. I am Black and Indigenous Caribbean. So for those who are not familiar with the Indigenous Caribbean folks, they are otherwise known as the Taino people. We also have Kalinago people, the Garifuna people. So, but my people were from the Greater Antilles, so they're also known as the Taino. Let's see, I was born and raised in Lenapehoking, the Philadelphia area of Lenapehoking, and I had always wanted to draw and paint since I was very little. My mother would work in the factories. She would come home with little bits and pieces of paper, and I would use the little bits and pieces of paper to draw stuff on. That love turned into something I wanted to take a little bit more seriously once I entered into community college of Philadelphia. I graduated from there, went off to Moore College of Art and Design, graduated from there, went to PAFA. I mean, I wish it went that smoothly. It didn't. There's a lot more story in between.
Mm-hmm. Of course, right.
But here I am today.
Here you are. And your bio and resume, I mean, what you have worked on is extensive. I mean, and you're very well known for your mural work here in Philadelphia, and Philadelphia is very known for its murals. Can you talk about where did you start what did you study in school, and then how did you move into becoming one of the better known mural artists in Philadelphia?
Well, I studied just drawing and painting. The first time I became acquainted with mural arts, I was studying to be an art teacher at University of the Arts. Okay. And they had one of those career days. And I saw the mural arts table. It was around 2000, and I would say about 2000. And they said, "Hey, do you want to check us out? You want to, come work with us as a teacher?" And I said, "Sure." So that's how I started. Around 2004, I had taken a course with Dave McShane, who's one of the premier muralists in the city, and it was like a mural arts course. I was one of the first class to ever take it, and I really loved to do the mural work. However, I had taken a full-time teaching job around the same time. Mm-hmm. So I was teaching for a little while, for several years, but still doing my practice on smaller surfaces. It wasn't until around 2000 and I would say 2016 that I was invited by Tiny Room of Elephants, mm-hmm. Which is kind of like, it's an all arts kind of festival. It's a tri-state centered. They do the hip hop music, and they do the storytelling, the writing, the dancing. So all elements of hip hop. And I was invited, and that's when I did my first bigger piece, again, for the first time in many years, since mm-hmm. I had worked with mural art so many years ago. So, and ever since then, I've been working.
So I saw the piece that you did for Tiny Elephants. I think it was it in 2019? That one that is in at the riverfront, at Cherry Street Pier. So was
Yes.
that, so do you you work with tiny elephants every year? Is that a yearly event?
It has become a yearly event. Yeah, actually, we get invited. It gets bigger and bigger every year. There was supposed to be a 2020 but
Right.
because of COVID, it was canceled. But they're
Yeah.
still doing smaller pieces, which I was really grateful about. I just finished one this past week.
Oh, okay. That's
Um,
fabulous.
Thank you. I would just finish this one at 7th and Bainbridge, Hey Rally Coffee Shop. Um,
That's great. I can't wait to
so
see it.
yeah, it's really cool. It was of Crystal Bird Fawcett, and she was the first Black American um, woman to serve as state legislator all the way back in 1938,
Hmm.
and she was based here in Philadelphia.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And the mural that you did for Cherry Street Pier, it still exists there. If you, right, is that right? If you go up to the second floor, it's there, and it's really powerful and something to see. So if you're able to get there, can you talk a little bit about that mural and what inspired it, and what you wanted people to feel or think when they walk away from it?
Yeah, definitely. Now that piece, that was part of Tiny Room. I think the big red one. That I have two upstairs.
Mm-hmm.
I have a big red one. Now that was the first one I did for Tiny Room. That was about 2016. Now that one, we were talking about. There's a lot of things that we were talking about in there, but at the time I was working with Voices of Barrio, which is a kind of like an activist, small advocate. I'm sorry.
Advocacy. Yeah, we got
Advocacy
it.
that deals with issues in Puerto Rico and Boriquen. So because that's where my mother's family is from. So we were dealing with there was illegal dumping that was happening. There was also the promesa that was being talked about, the Jones Act. There's all these restrictions, the fact that Puerto Rico is still a colony and all these other things. Now, this is pre-Hurricane Maria.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a lot of issues about people wanting to kind of like separate themselves from the United States because of all of these issues. So those elements are within that mural, and also what was going on with Standing Rock. And I was working with Philly for Standing Rock at the time. We were developing some actions. We were working on a lot of events that we were trying to build awareness and raise awareness of what was going on out there in Standing Rock with the Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota people struggling against this pipeline. So that particular piece has a young Lakota woman centered holding this black snake, but holding it like in a way where it's like it's not going anywhere, Yeah. And then, this idea of coming together, because then I have the Jibaro from Puerto Rico with his machete about to help cut it off too. So it's just like, just come on, we gotta fight this. We gotta get together and destroy this black snake, because all of these struggles are connected, because if we were to look at the banks and at the companies that were funding this initiative, there was the same banks and the same companies that were also funding what was going on in Puerto Rico, like with the illegal dumping and the spraying of the naled, which is a toxic chemical that's banned in like so many countries, and so on and so forth. So there was these are the same kind of I guess bad guys, that were affecting both communities so far apart, but people had enough, people had enough of this, and they were rising up. So that was actually painted during that time. Like it was happening then, it wasn't a before or after. It was just like everything was happening I put a lot of emotion in there, so.
Well, yeah. What can you tell us a little bit more about your work with Philly for Standing Rock, and how did you make the journey there? Did people from here make the journey there, and how impactful do you think it was with the community here? Because I think the indigenous community here understands a lot of it, but the non-indigenous maybe are not as in touch with indigenous issues globally. So what was the reception, and how do you think that you impacted the wider Philadelphia community with your work?
Well, I think that it was a coalition of folks that we were wanting it to be like an indigenous centered, indigenous led like action here in Philadelphia. We do not have a center. We used to have a center many years ago. I'm just putting a little bit of background. So
right. Yeah.
We don't have a center. The center closed down, but way back in the early 2000s. There wasn't necessarily a very strong local base, There are Lenape that still live here. There are folks that live in diaspora who are native from their different territories that live here, work here. So we had this loose coalition of folks that have said, let's help our folks back, or let's help our relatives back out in the Dakota. So what happened was it just started off with a very small action, and just I think a couple of concerned folks came together. It was also like some non-native folks too. So we had like Deep Philly Green that helped, and like so many other organizations. I think some Quaker, some Friends organizations helped, and there was people that were just more or less tuned in and plugged in and concerned, but again, very small. So we started with this idea of like, first let's build some visibility on what's happening. Let's amplify. And the only way we can pretty much do this is if we like start doing actions. Like we had an action that was led in front of the engineers, the Army Corps of Engineers. That was that's in near 13th and Market, like around Juniper and Market. We had a big action there where people just laid down on the ground and they were not moving. We stopped traffic. We had to do these kinds of actions. We had to disrupt traffic. We had to, march in the streets because there's zero visibility of Native peoples anyway in Philadelphia. Yeah. Let alone what's going on elsewhere. So that's how we started. And born out of that, that's when a smaller group of us decided that, hey, I think we need to form at least a group here to continue to amplify voices and continue to, bring Native issues to light here in this area, this incredibly colonial space, as what Philadelphia is. When you come here, you're just bombarded with the beginning of the United States and the U.S.
It's all about the tourism here. I mean, that's the narrative, and that's what they're sticking to. So you're right. It's everywhere.
Yeah. So it's so much in your face. So like we decided to start Indigenous 215. So there was a group of us, and that's where we are right now. I mean, we're still trying to kind of be supportive of what's going on, especially with what's going on with Black Lives Matter, and uplift Black folks and Black voices. There are members such as myself who are Black and Native. So of course that these issues really hit home. And
Right.
then, and also, centering around, the possibility, the future of the Columbus statue
Yes.
and all these other things. So a lot of these things are being talked about right now.
Well, I wanted to talk to you about the Columbus statue. Have you been down there to the South Philly area where, if you're not familiar, listeners, there were some vigilantes protecting the Columbus statue in South Philly, and a reporter was beat up and tires slashed, and it seemed like they from the video, I wasn't there, but it seemed like the police were protecting the vigilantes with the rifles, and that it was a very dangerous space to be. Were there members of Indigenous 215 present at that time? Or were they the vigilante? What are they? Are they called terrorists? They're terrorists. Were they? Were they there protecting Columbus for no reason? What was the scenario there? Because I saw bits and pieces on the news and online.
Yeah. Now that was very much a organic happening. Everything was happening so fast and at once. I mean, we didn't have any notice of what was going on. Also, these folks are armed and they're very dangerous. There's some very brave young people, some very brave allies that are going out there.
So
and
there
kudos
were
to
people
them.
going out there because they knew that the armed coalition was there already, and they went out there to stand up against them, or were they there first?
No, the armed folks were there first.
Okay,
The armed folks were looking for this mysterious Antifa,
right,
organization,
right.
and because what they were doing also, they were mirroring what was happening in Fishtown, what happened in Fishtown
Right,
too,
exactly.
with the whole idea of like protecting their streets or protecting their neighborhood.
Yeah.
And, so it was that, it was also reactionary. So these guys were out there protecting their slab of stone. They were protecting this monument because their Rizzo statue was brought down.
Right. That's right.
And when I say there, I'm not being facetious. I'm saying there because there's some folks that really feel ownership over this Rizzo statue. They feel ownership over this this painting, this mural that was painted over, that was there at the Italian market for 25 years. They feel personally attacked by this, and it's not so much as protection of the neighborhood. They feel like they're personally attacked, that these
like their culture and their heritage is being attacked, and their place in American society is being attacked. Well, I want to explore this more. We have to take a break, and we'll explore this more after we come back from our break. This is Rise and Thrive on Usula Media. We'll be back.
Okay. Thank you.
Don't wait. Communicate. Make your emergency plan today.
Whereas like they wanted, call him Saint Columbus. It was like this whole thing.
Yeah.
So I think, okay.
Hi, this is Tailinh Agoyo, and we're back on Rise and Thrive. I'm with Priscilla Bell, who is a Taino artist. And when we left for break, we were talking about one of the Columbus statues that is in Philadelphia, that there was a lot of, there was some violence around last week, and it still continues. So can you tell us more about, so there was a petition to take that statue down, but there weren't people there protesting the statue at that point. But to follow in Fishtown, a neighborhood in Philadelphia, what was it, about 2 weeks ago, for 2 nights straight, there were armed white supremacists walking around protecting the neighborhood. And the National Guard came in, and it was very dangerous and very scary. And they were attacking reporters. So this whole Columbus situation kind of followed suit. So can you just elaborate on what you know about those details?
Yeah. So just to reiterate, I feel that it was just a very organic kind of happening, where the first night, and that was the night that I think it was the Unicorn Riot reporter had gotten assaulted. You had these armed folks that were standing around the statue, protecting this statue from this unknown force. So,
Right.
And then the second night, it felt like, I'm so sorry. The second night, it felt as if there was more people that rallied, that had saw this first happening.
Mm-hmm.
And then they just wanted to just join in and protect, and this idea, right? This idea of don't tread on me, my culture is being assaulted. And I think that that's what Columbus represents to them, like their culture. But there's so many like really amazing Italian American.
Well, yeah, this is what we talk about, is that, do you want a genocidal, maniacal, human trafficker to be the representation of your culture? You deserve better.
Right.
And that's just such an interesting conversation. And I've actually never asked somebody who's a supporter of Columbus that, because I wonder what their answer would be. Or do they really not believe that? Because I saw you posted this somewhere. You said, I mean, the writings are there. This is not fiction. It's there. He had diaries. People recounted the horrific acts that he did. And I know we don't learn that in school, but they're there for, if anybody is interested, they're readily available.
Yes. Firsthand accounts by his own hand, by his own hand. These are not just, now see what folks are really going on, especially folks that live here in the United States. What they're going on is the myth of Columbus that was brought into popularity in the 19th century by Washington Irving. This is documented. This is proof. Washington Irving had wrote this life and story of Christopher Columbus, very much the way he wrote Sleepy Hollow, very much he wrote Rip Van Winkle. it was not based on historical facts. He even wrote in the piece that Columbus ventured out to discover whether or not the world was round, and everybody thought the world was flat. And that was like erroneous at that
Right.
time.
Mhm.
Many European monarchs and scholars and so on and so forth, African scholars, Middle Eastern
Mhm.
scholars, knew that the world was round.
Right.
They
Right.
knew it.
Mhm.
They knew, and so that was something that was trumped up by Washington Irving. So when I was viewing a lot of these like live feeds that was coming from Marconi Plaza, which is where that one statue is, folks were, a lot of people that were supporters of Columbus were saying, but if it wasn't for him, the
Mhm.
world was, people would think that the world was flat. If it wasn't for him, we wouldn't have all these advances. If it wasn't for him, and it's like, wow, this is all built on a lie.
Mhm.
This is all built on a
Mhm.
lie, despite the fact, I mean, the truths that are out there that are in black and white, stating that he started the transatlantic African trade, African slave trade. He started, like the enslavement and trafficking of human folks, of native people, that children, girls as young as 9 years old,
Mhm.
um, that he willingly massacred people
Yeah.
with the intent of just getting a few pieces of gold.
Mhm.
His actions were so horrific even at the time, because the popular thing is, well, we can't judge
Right. Right.
the history, the actions of the past, because they had
Yes.
different. No, he was so
No.
horrific that even Spain
Mhm.
had went and grabbed up their man and brought
Mhm.
him back
Like,
in
come home.
chains,
You need to come
you
home.
know?
Yeah.
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 So it's really ridiculous.
It's sad. It's sad, and it's scary. I think last week was the first time that I really thought, uh, because I want to be part of the demonstrations. I went to the big one at the art museum,
Mm.
but I just thought, I'm not losing my life to a Columbus supporter. I mean, that's just not the way I'm going out. I have a lot more things that I
Right.
need to do. We need to keep fighting, but it's become an interesting space because there's so much violence going on across the country with the hangings. I mean,
Yes.
every morning you wake up and your heart is breaking,
Yeah.
and you're angry, right? And it's like, how do we keep fighting without being intimidated by brutal people who just don't care and don't care about black and brown people? How do
Yeah.
we fight back? We're not like that. And
Yeah.
so what do you think about that? Like, how do you think that we need to take action? I know that's a really loaded question, but what are your thoughts? Because I just think I know what I can do personally day by day. There are things, but for all of us to continue making our voices heard, how do we do that without so much violence toward our communities? Even more, adding even more violence than there already is.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I think that everybody can do their part in their own way.
Right.
Not everybody can go out into the streets.
Right.
Not everybody can, maybe there's some older folks that might not be able to walk door to door to pass out petitions and so on and so forth.
And
But
especially now with the COVID situation,
exactly.
it's even more difficult for us.
So what do we do? Let's support Black and Brown businesses.
Mm-hmm.
So have conversations with family members who might see something that's racist or say something that's really insensitive. Open up these conversations. Do not let certain things slide, like jokes and stuff at the workplace. Don't let that
Right.
slide. You know,
Right.
it might be a pain in the behind. It might be like, oh, I don't want to, deal with this
Yeah.
right now, but we have to,
Hmm.
because we imagine, waking up having to deal with this every day as myself as a Black and Native person, and with Black and Native sons, that go out that don't understand that people are looking at them as if they're threats. I mean, they don't care that my son, had really great grades in school, and
Hmm.
he's really gentle and really cool, and everybody loves him,
Hmm.
when they meet him.
Yeah.
They don't care.
They don't care.
They only see his body, and they're afraid of his body, and so we have to kind of deconstruct that and see why is this so. Okay, let's how we can also do it too. Learn, like read books, written by Black authors, by African authors, you know, read and educate ourselves. Don't like rely on your Black friend or your Native friend to
Hmm. Right.
spark these
Do the work.
conversations,
Hmm.
you know, because we're traumatized. We're already
Yeah.
we're going through this every day. So I really encourage folks who are non BIPOC to go and do research, make creative conversations with friends and family, to support Black businesses, to support Indigenous businesses, brown businesses, to strike up conversations and be really authentic and be present,
Hmm.
um, for folks. And I think that that's how some people can actually, like if you feel that you don't have it physically within you to go on a march, those are other things you can do, uplift voices, create space, protect
Right.
people, you know if
Hmm.
you see a little Black kid who is being harassed by a store owner, speak up for that kid. Hey,
Hmm.
he didn't take anything. Why are you being so mean to him?
Speak up.
I'm not going to patronize this business anymore because you're rude to that. Like what happened in Starbucks in Philadelphia a couple
Hmm.
of years ago with the two gentlemen who were just waiting for their colleague,
Right.
and they were brought out by the police. The police was weaponized against two young Black men
Who are
who
having a
were
business meeting.
having a business meeting that
Hmm.
people have at Starbucks all the time. And
Hmm.
how awful was it that it happened in Philadelphia? Here, it didn't happen down
Yeah,
south,
that's right.
or anything like that. So let's we can take small actions. We can
Hmm.
have these conversations, so to do our part.
Those are all great ideas. And you're right. I think that that's where the shift has to happen, because so many people have been complacent and do not speak up, or don't even understand how damaging the microaggressions are, that they just, they're privileged in their worlds and they're not seeing it. And I get that. It's hard. How would you know if you didn't have to know?
Right.
You live in this bubble, and that's great for you, but not great for everybody else. So yeah, I agree. I think those steps are really good steps to take. Not everybody has to be out in the streets, but yeah, it's an interesting time. And so let's move back to the art, because I love your work. It's very powerful, and I love the idea that you use. You incorporate community members. You incorporate who you are, to tell the stories. And like the stories we posted, I mean, the images we posted up on the flyer, um, are so beautiful and powerful. When we're going to take a break, but when we come back, I'd really like to explore your work a bit and talk about how art makes change and tells our own stories. Okay, so when we come back, we'll do that. This is Rise and
Awesome.
Thrive on Usula Media.
Don't wait. Communicate. Make your emergency plan today.
(150/90).
180/111.
160/110. I had a stroke.
This is what high blood pressure looks like. You might not feel its symptoms, but the results from a stroke are far from invisible or silent. If you've come off your treatment plan, get back on it, or talk with your doctor to create an exercise, diet, and medication plan that works for you. Go to loweryourhbp.org.
If I would have followed a treatment plan, I would not be in this situation.
On Rise and Thrive, we're here with Priscilla Bell, and we're ready to talk about some art. I'm really excited. Priscilla, your work is very much a part of who you are. The images that I've seen are because you're an activist and you speak your mind. And I see you on social media and in wherever we bump into each other. You're very outspoken about the truth and what's right. And I know that filters into your work too. Obviously, how can it not? How do you decide like what themes you're going to go in with your work, just depending on what specific projects you're working on?
Oh, that's a good question. So like you said, a lot of times I'm already working on something, whether it be a project with students, because I'm also an art teacher.
Mm-hmm.
It could be an action that I have taken a part of. But a lot of times before I'm going to do a larger work or a major work that I feel that I have to kind of like focus a lot of energies to, what I do is I do an old-fashioned thing where I just take a fast. Clears my mind, it clears my head, and I just let whatever the canvas or the board or whatever surface I'm working on kind of like fully materialize as I'm working. So, for example, just recently the crystal bird, I was kind of like, I went to bed thinking, what should I do? What should I do right now on that board? That would be something that's significant, historically significant, something that speaks to right now also. So went to bed, woke up in the morning, and it just came to me. I said, wow, Christopher Fawcett, that's it. That's what I'm going to do. And I ran it by, the coffee shop owner and Yaya from Tiny Room. Mm-hmm. And they thought it was a fantastic idea. Nobody's ever heard of her, save from just maybe a small pocket in West Philly that might see her marker or something or maybe like a really avid Philadelphia history buff. But I didn't know about her, So I was like, wow, let me Great. Just paint her image. And so even when I was painting her image, people will walk by. Who is this? Who was she? What did she do? And it's like, boy, it's just that action of just painting this. It just sparked discussion. Mm-hmm. I wrote down her name so people can just Google her. People were walking by when I was finishing the quote the day after, and they were just like, wow, I looked her up. Thank you for doing this. She was an amazing person, and she was a Black woman in a time where, this is before, civil rights had taken hold and so on and so forth. And she was like on the forefront of this. And yeah, that made me feel really great. It's like, wow, these conversations, because art is communication.
Yes.
Right? It's visual communication. Mm-hmm. So, spark up conversation. What is this about? one of the pieces that you put onto the flyer, which is the little boy that's at a record player,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that talks about
Yes.
generational differences.
Love that piece.
Thank you. So, actually, my son at the time when he was,
I was wondering.
he was a little younger, you know.
Mhm.
he was about 11, 12, and he was like, you know, he was really interested in music. He was taking up guitar at the time, and he wanted to know more. And I happened to have a record player, and and you know, every so often, usually on Friday nights, we like listen to old music, and we put away the iPods. We put away
That's so
iPod.
great.
I'm old, so they don't even use iPods anymore. Put away
Yeah,
the phone.
yeah. Right.
You know,
And you listen to the record player.
yes, we listened
That's
to the record
amazing.
player. We would listen
Wow.
to jazz music. We'll listen to like old, you know, R&B music, or we'll listen to, and then hip hop music. So at the time, he's like, "Wow, Mom, this is like really, really great. Like, wow, what is this?" And I said, "Boy, oh boy, it's like how to capture this moment, you know, because this
Yes.
is about generations and like passing a baton, you know, and you know, and things happen so fast. Technology we went from record player to tape deck to
Mm-hmm.
CD player, and
CDs, right.
now it's digital.
Yeah.
And it happened like within a lot of our lifetime, you know, but he's never had that transition. He's like, for him, it's like CD, maybe when he was much younger, and then digital. So there's that loss of the tactile. There's that loss of just like
Yeah.
placing the
Right.
record on, you know, that act, you know, and then on top of that, you have that layer of like this older music that was born from a time, like he's always known that hip hop's been around, like as far as he was concerned, like it's always been a
Yes.
genre,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but it started somewhere. It
Mm-hmm.
was born out of, you know, the poverty and just like people like having to deal with the system in New York City at the time, and so on and so forth. It spread like wildfire throughout a lot of poor Black and Latinx communities, and even Native communities, and so on and so forth. So it's like it was like the music of the people, right? And that's what that painting was about. It was kind of like bridging that gap, you know.
Yeah, and the painting really does get that across, and it gives it has a lot of emotion and depth to it. I didn't know it was your son, but you know, I thought it might be, and I was thinking how interesting it is to present an Indigenous person. Also, you know, that's another layer, and in not the way that people typically decide how Indigenous people should look or be perceived, you know, or are perceived or should be presented. And so this is your child who's Black and Indigenous. Is that right? And
Yes.
so, you know, so that I really just found that layer really beautiful also, because it's our kids, and you know, they're doing their thing. And I thought that was beautiful also.
Thank you. So yeah, and you know, I had some of the elements of hip hop in the background, and
right. Yes,
I had Master J.
Yes, it was so cool. Is this on your website? Is it on your website too? Okay, so listeners, go to Priscilla's website, pbutterpaint.com, and check it out. It is really a cool painting. And it's funny that you brought up how you meditate on what you're going to paint, because I do that too. I'll go to sleep and I'll not formally meditate, because I'm terrible at that. If I tell myself I have to do it, it won't happen. But before I go to sleep, I just really think, okay, I need to solve this problem, or I need a creative idea for where the seeds are. And I'll wake up with the idea. And I love that. And I love that process where you can really just go deep into your like subconscious and grab those things that are alive in us, but not fully present day to day because we're so busy. But I really like what you were talking about, how art is communication and education. And we just have, in Philadelphia, Philly slashed the arts budget down to zero. But then if the proposal was down to zero, but then we found out this morning that the African American museum will be funded, and I didn't have time to read the whole thing, but like $1 million is going back into the arts, I believe. But I haven't read it all, so I'll do that after I get offline. But it's still slashed, and it's still very, very little compared to the police budget, which is like 700 million plus, and the arts budget was 4 million, and now, from what I've read, it's about 1 million. How do you think that? How do you think that will affect our work as artists and art and culture producers? I think that for me, I think that will still continue on, but it always just makes it. It's always been an uphill battle, and now we have even more of one. How do you think that affects, like, not just the art, but the communication, the social programs, how people learn, and how to make a better community and society in general?
Yeah, and that hits me as a teacher. Like, the first thing I think about are my students.
Mm-hmm.
They really, really do. A lot of schools don't even have art.
Right.
I happen to teach at a school, a private school that has funding for art, and they're lucky. The kids are really, really lucky. I'm lucky to be teaching them. But there's so many schools that don't have this. So they rely on after school programs. They rely on like mural arts, or like, let's say, Art Sanctuary, or like other different organizations that provides like the arts to them. And when we mean the arts, it doesn't have to be visual. It could be music arts. It could be, dance,
performing arts. Right.
Yes. I mean, cooking, culinary arts. So it's like all arts are considered, literary arts. So, if they slash the funding, to zero, it's mind-boggling, because they have been slashing. They have been defunding. When they talk about defunding the police, they have been defunding the Philadelphia School District. They've been defunding the arts. They've been defunding our children, our future, for decades. And it just keeps on getting smaller and smaller. It's such an insult that it can even be, it's cut down to zero. It's such an insult. And I don't even understand why, like, this is even being like even talked about. I really don't get how the mayor who proposed this can sleep at night, consider it. I just, like, knowing that a lot of these programs rely on city funding in order to work.
And that's how you make a community whole, and that's how you heal community and have people understand each other. And so it's so short-sighted to increase budgets on the violent and like the militarization of the police, and not have people be whole. It just seems so backwards. And I think you're saying, like, how does he sleep at night? I think he just doesn't get it. He can't get it, because I don't know, some people just aren't raised that way. I don't know how else to say. I just don't think that you can explain it to them. But when you think about us during quarantine, art is in every single thing we do. From the minute we wake up and brush our teeth and use that tube of toothpaste, that is art and design. To when we go to bed and shut off the light, that is art and design. And I think that when people say, "Oh, arts, you're such a snowflake," how come, all the insults about when we say arts are important, they're not realizing that they incorporate art into their lives 10,000 times a day. They're watching movies, they're listening to music, they're cooking, they're it's just, why is there such a disconnect between, I think when people think of art, they think of a sculpture or a painting, which is incredibly valuable and valid too, but they're thinking about just people sitting in a studio making fine art. Yeah. And I think it's easy for them to discount that, which shouldn't be discounted at all.
Right, exactly. And to second what you were saying, it's like, we can even go further. People are sitting on art, because there's
Right.
industrial designers, there's
Absolutely.
interior
Yeah.
designers, there's folks who build their buildings that had
Right.
to learn how, the technical side of drawing,
Mm-hmm.
in order to place things just so. You have to be an artist to design,
Mm-hmm. That is so true.
buildings and
Yes.
cars and,
Everything. There's not one
spaceships.
thing that doesn't incorporate art in the world.
Right,
Not one.
exactly.
You're
And
right. Spaceships. Right.
I went to undergrad with folks. Who went on to um, designing cars, who went on to
Mm-hmm.
crafting chairs and building things, and went on to creating things that are in people's everyday, lives, in people's living rooms, in people's dining rooms, So I went to undergrad, and if we didn't have that foundation, at first we wouldn't have these wonderful things that
Mm-hmm.
they designed, that they created,
Right.
you know
Yeah.
so, and it has to start somewhere. It starts when they're kids. It's
Yes.
like going backtrack to when my mother brought pieces of paper from home, and from her job to
From
home,
work.
and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and I'm like drawing and stuff. The interest was there when I was a child. There was that interest, and me looking on the walls and seeing like graffiti and things of that nature growing up in this urban environment. It's like that was like something that was like very colorful and of interest to me. Of course, that turned into what we see today with mural arts, and because it was born
Mm-hmm.
out of the anti-graffiti network so many
Yes.
years
Yes.
ago.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a lot of these things, people might not see the connection, but there are connections. And it really starts with our youth. It starts with our kids. If you're shortchanging our youth, you are going to shortchange the future,
Mm-hmm.
period.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I don't want to live in a future where there's no art, where there's no design. But, we might as well just be sitting on,
Well, yeah, sitting in four walls, which were
yeah.
designed also, by the way. Yes, I don't understand it. It just stumps me. I don't understand. But so hopefully, I guess we just keep fighting, and we find creative ways to get things done. But it's just sad. It's unfortunate that, and I hope other cities do not follow Philadelphia. And just, even talking about the revenue that the arts bring to the city is known for its arts. And so the bottom line is really very short-sighted, because how many jobs are created because of the arts? How many people come into town, airplanes, hotels, Anyway, arts is fabulous. I think we have to wrap up, but
Okay.
there's so much more that you and I have to talk about. We have to continue this conversation one day.
Yes.
I really appreciate the work that you're putting out into the world. I really appreciate that your voice in Philadelphia and out in the world. It's very special. And so I'm so glad that you were able to take the time to connect with me here today. I really am. So thank you so much for coming, and let's continue this conversation. And definitely, please go on to pbutterpaint.com and visit Priscilla's website and check out her work. And if you want to contact her, it's pbutterpaint@gmail.com. I love it. Thank you for joining us on Rise and Thrive, Indigenous Art, Culture, and Joyful Acts of Resistance. This is Tailin Agoyo. Thank you, Priscilla.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye now. Have a good day.
Bye.
All right, take care.